hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of the Indigo Womb Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host and sister friend, Shatia T. Owsley, and thank you for watching and or listening. So sit back, grab some tea and a notebook, and let's vibe together as we have organic and practical conversations embracing intuitive womb wisdom, spirituality, and a sprinkle of magic to rebel, restore, and radiate overall wellness in our lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Indigo Womb Wisdom Podcast. I am your host and your sister friend, Shatia T. Owsley, and today we are joined by a beautiful spirit. She is a death doula, a funeral celebrant, a researcher, and a violence prevention professional who sits at the intersection of end-of-life care, cultural competency, and community healing. Drawing from her experience supporting individuals and families through death, grief, and transition, she advocates for dignified, informed, and culturally responsive end-of-life planning, particularly within the historically marginalized communities. She is the founder of the Afterwords, a death care practice dedicated to legacy, preservation, storytelling, and trauma-informed end-of-life support. She is also the creator of the Afterwords Guide, an end-of-life planning tool designed to help individuals and families document stories, values, and wishes. Today, I would like to introduce our guest, Miss Amiyah King.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today. And we are talking about a topic that we're going to all experience at some time in our life, but not a topic that people just openly talk about all the time. And so I'm so happy that you're here today because I feel just from our previous conversation that you will be able to shed some light on what transition can look like when you have that support, when you have planning around it, when ritual is incorporated with it, and how people can really not look at it with fear. And so I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us today.
Me too.
I know I read your bio. You are doing some amazing work, but I want to know how this all got started for you.
I've always been a curious child. Like I was always kind of consumed with and really interested in death and morbid things. I'm a poet by nature, so I remember writing my first collection of poems when I was like 12. And I showed it to my dad and he was like, I'll never forget. He said, why is everything so morbid? Like, why are you talking about that? You're 12. You never even been through nothing really. But it was something that was just in me. I naturally connected with endings and beginnings. And I'm an only child, and my father passed away in 2017, and his death was really unexpected, not just for us, but for him. He was 40 years old, never really outright talked about his plans. So he didn't have any final wishes for his funeral or for his body, nothing that was documented at least. And as the only child, I had just turned 19. So I was over the age of 18. In New York State, I was considered his next of kin. It was a DNR situation. So I was responsible for making that call on his DNR, as well as like wrangling my family, planning the funeral, making sure things got paid for, and then all while having to actually deal with my grief. So his passing really opened up my eyes, both physically and spiritually. I credit my dad passing with also helping me connect with myself and the world around me. I started to hear him and see him in ways that I couldn't ignore. Like this wasn't a coincidence. This is my dad. And it really helped me see that there's a bigger meaning to life. And I understood that if I had some support in those moments, I have a lot of family members who are medical professionals, but they didn't have the heart to translate to me what was going on in that moment. So I realized if I had a non-biased, non-judgmental person to be there, how much easier that process could have been, which is what made me interested in wanting to help others through those difficult times too.
And so, what is a death doula?
There's so many words. I mean, I think that the most recognizable one is like a healer, right? Or an advocate, a guide, I like the word liaison, a translator almost. Death doulas can really stand in that threshold, similarly to birth doulas, as they stand right between life and birth. We stand at the threshold of life and death. We do the same things for the families and the dying person that a birth doula would do for a mother who's bringing life into this world. And although the word death doula is like coined now in Western civilizations and overseas, it's a role that has been carried ancestrally for generations and generations. Typically, women in specific communities were trusted with being the death midwife and carrying out specific rituals and practices that ushered someone into their afterlife. This isn't a new concept by any means at all.
And so what does that look like? What does being a deaf doula look like?
It's so nuanced because there's niches. Like everyone kind of gets in their own bag when it comes to this, and they have their own offering that they bring to the table. If you search up the word death doula now, you'll probably see a lot of definitions surrounding bedside, actually sitting with someone in those final moments and supporting them through the actual transition. That could be holding their hands or just standing in the room, turning the lights down low once you can hear their breathing slowing, lighting candles, making sure that the atmosphere is right for that final moment. But there's so many other ways death doulaship can manifest. And it really depends on your personal background and what you bring to the table. I've worked with death doulas who come from backgrounds in law. So they might not have the capacity to sit and hold your hand while you're dying, but they can help you make sure all your affairs are in order, make sure the family knows what to expect step by step. It really is like your personal quality and what you bring. There's death doulas who do sound healing. There's death doulas who strictly focus on ritual, who strictly focus on family reunification. I'm sure you know death can bring out the ugly side of people, and death doulas can stand in that middle and almost be like a mediator. So it's really personal. It's a personal calling. And whatever you bring to the table, there is more than likely space for it in this industry.
What is your specialty? What is the afterward?
Learned through time. I'm one of those people who I don't have the capacity to sit bedside. I have done it. I worked as a hot work volunteered as a hospice volunteer. I've worked in funeral homes and unfortunately, well, fortunately for me, I'm extremely empathetic. And I'm not one of those people, even in my day job, I can't leave work at home. I'm going to come home and I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about what to do next. So being that person, especially if you're the only person that someone has as they're dying, that's a huge responsibility. And I've realized that it takes up a lot from me emotionally. So I'm stepping away from doing direct service in that way. And now I'm in the consulting space where I'm helping other death doulas figure out what their niche is, get connected to the right resources to actually execute their niche. My business, the Afterwords, I love helping people tell their stories. My father never got the chance to. He was very loud and boisterous. My dad, I always tell people he had a bunch of tattoos all over him. And he would like go crazy telling us every explanation of the tattoos. And when he's here, it's like, okay, we get it. We get it. But when he was in a medically induced coma, I could hear every story he told me clear as day. And it like made me understand him so much more as he was on his deathbed. But he never got the chance to write those things down, to document them anywhere. They're only up here. And I'm his only child. So I'm the only one who I feel like I have his whole story in my brain. So creating the Afterwards for me was a way of honoring my father, making sure that other people in my family and other families have the opportunity to tell their story in their words and leave them behind in a way that doesn't feel too laborious. It doesn't feel too, I don't want to say the word dramatic, but it doesn't feel like, okay, we got to sit down and write your last wishes. Like this book is an opportunity. Any time of day you can go in and write, hey, this was a good memory, or hey, I actually think I want them to wear this at my funeral. It doesn't have to be such a taboo conversation. It's something you can constantly update as you go through life. So that was my goal is like you said in the beginning, making it easier to facilitate these conversations in our community because where I'm from, if you talk about it, you're manifesting it, which is
Mhm.
like almost the exact opposite. When you talk about it, it abolishes that fear because you know what's going to happen next. And it gives you the blueprint for being able to heal afterwards. The afterwards.
I love it. I feel like that's a great segue into my next question, which is what are some of the misconceptions of death and maybe even a death doula them?
I'm just going to preface by saying most of my experience and most of the stuff that I'll say throughout this interview is strictly in relation to the Black community because I've seen how other communities handle grief and death is vastly different from us. I've seen white funeral services where they come in pajamas. They look at their grandma for an hour. They're like, oh, she's dead. Okay, y'all want to go get dinner? Wait, did y'all sign the insurance papers? Let's go get dinner. And it's over with. It's done. But what I've seen in our communities is we come into these services with such heavy hearts. Sometimes there's family drama. There's so much that we're dressed to the nines. We're celebrating the life. And then still, you see people crying their hearts out as they're leaving. Like for us, it's such an emotional burden that I believe is really ancestral and biological. And I think a lot of misconceptions in our community come from slavery, of course. During slavery, death was your only way out. It was seen as an escape. And I don't know where in our society that kind of got misconstrued or that's kind of gotten flipped, but that is still, I believe, that still rings true for us today. Death is one of our only ways out. It is our homegoing. It is our final act of service to this earthly realm. And I would love to see people in our communities, especially churches and institutions that facilitate death ceremonies in the Black community, to make that link more strong. Everything we do in our funeral services, especially me being in New Orleans, every practice we have goes back to Africa. It goes back to some African spiritual practice. We don't realize it, but we are honoring our ancestors every step of the way, all the time. And if we could make that connection more clearly, I think some misconceptions about death wouldn't be as present. One of them being I'm trying to be democratic, I'll say. I don't want to project and impose my personal beliefs, but a lot of the times when I work with Baptist, Christian, Black families here in the South, they are very resistant to hospice care. They're very resistant to even having these conversations with me. I could be sitting bedside with them. They're in hospice. We know what's happening, but they don't want to talk about none of that. They just want to talk about the weather. Did you watch the game last week? They're still very much so right here in the 3D. They don't even want to go deeper because, like I said before, it almost feels like a surrender into that death. And they don't want to do that. And I think there's a lot of fear that surrounds death for us now, which I do think goes back to our biological makeup because, yeah, I think it goes back to our biological makeup.
And so you mentioned New Orleans. You are in New Orleans. And for those that have not experienced how, I would say, death is celebrated in New
Mhm,
Orleans, right? I would
mhm.
like for you to just touch on that just a little bit.
New Orleans has Louisiana as a whole, of course, has such a deep and a rich culture with honoring death and celebrating life across all communities. But I'm most familiar with, again, the Black community, the history of jazz funerals, the history of Black funeral homes here. It's so deep. I mean, our ancestors literally went from having to care for our dead in horse stables next to livestock. These people who were once animal caretakers ended up becoming undertakers and they ended up becoming trusted members of their community that started mutual aid and benevolent societies that went on to start some of the first Black funeral homes in the country. So I just think the history here is so embedded with respect for the dead and respect for the lives that they lived. A lot of that, the spiritual essence surrounding death is understood here. Like once you're gone, people get it. We're gonna party for you, we're gonna celebrate for you, we're gonna enjoy the life that you had here. But that moment between your life and death, we're going to try to avoid as much as we can. And that's really what I would like to see evolve in a different way. Of course, it's beautiful to honor someone once they're gone, but how do we do that while they're here or while they're in that threshold between life and death? How do we make sure they still feel ready and prepared and we feel ready to grieve them when they're gone?
Yeah. And so, what are some of the things that you use or things that you implement to make the transition a little smoother for them?
As I'm talking to you, it's easy to get really granular and like say exactly what I'm thinking. But of course,
Mhm.
when someone's dying, they're in a very vulnerable state, sensitive topics. I don't ever want to impose my beliefs on someone. I guess the way that I present, people can pass judgment very easily. I've had people not want to work with me who are very Christian, they might assume some things about my beliefs. So I take that into account with any person that I'm working with. If they've allowed me to be here, it's because they feel like I have something that I can impart on them. But it's still a very thin line. So I always come in with a trauma informed approach. Like I've said before, in our biological makeup, it's full of trauma, it's full of unprocessed grief. We literally had to watch our families be separated. We had to jump ship. We had to make decisions for years and years and years that have not been transmuted or somatically released from us. So, starting on a more broad level with my clients, I always ask about family. That's usually a tender spot for people. Ask them if there's any closure they need, unfinished business, which 9 times out of 10 there is, usually opens the door for deeper conversations because a lot of the time, the biggest regret people have on the deathbed isn't how much money they've made or didn't make. It has nothing to do with tangible, it's always relationships. They will tell you their whole life story and everywhere they feel like they made wrong decisions because they have time to reflect on it now. So getting people to open up about that is usually where I can kind of slip in some, well, hey, maybe we should write a letter to your daughter that you haven't spoken to in 30 years. Maybe we should get to the bottom of that first. And it helps them see greater meanings in everything, which I believe helps the soul transition and release some of that trauma that's stored in our bodies for their next generations and generations. So even if they don't understand some of the things we're doing or why we're doing, I've found that coming in with that trauma informed approach and individualizing it for each person, addressing their own personal trauma, it has a ripple effect in the broader process.
And for those who are unfamiliar, what is a trauma informed approach to care?
Yeah, I was actually just talking about this last night. I highly recommend everybody take the ACEs trauma test, the adverse childhood experiences. It's a very quick assessment, a self-assessment for you to see what score you have. And they actually recently created one for, I believe, communities impacted by violence and African American communities because our trauma is different from everyone else's trauma, but understanding that people's experiences in life have an effect on how they present in the world and how they carry themselves. That's really the foundation of the trauma informed approach. Of course, you can get into it and you can really learn how those adverse childhood experiences affect your health outcomes, your financial outcomes, your success outcomes. But on a base level, do it for yourself, understand your own trauma first, and naturally, you'll develop an empathy for others to understand how to approach everything you do with a trauma informed mindset.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
You mentioned just, previously that you really try your best not to impose your beliefs and your experience and your thinking when you're working with clients. You and I had a quick conversation some time ago, and we talked about some of the things that we share and some of the things that we like. And some of those things you do incorporate into your work that you
Mhm.
do. And so I would like for you to just kind of touch on for those clients who are open to your approach and your rituals, what does that look like? What does ritual and death look like from your experience and your belief system?
It's not much different from ritual in life. I use the same rituals I do for myself with processing my father's death, my grandmother's death with my clients. And I explain that to them. I let them know. 'Cause a lot they have questions too, like, "How did you get here? You're so young. Why are you doing this? Why do you wanna spend your time with me while I'm dying?" And I'm very open with them. I explain to them, "Hey, after my dad died, I started seeing things and feeling things, and this changed my whole life. I was a devout Christian prior to this, and now I understand that there's more things that may not be written down in text for me to go back to, but I feel them, and I know that they're real." And I've had a pretty positive response. I have had some Christian clients who totally understand and respect that. They do want to know a lot about my beliefs around Jesus Christ and his existence, and we'll talk about that. But I'm very open with my background, first of all, so that there's a level of trust. I will say, as far as rituals, it takes a lot of explanation. I'm thinking now specifically on one client I recently had who was a little hesitant with just candles and incense, but like, hey, we're going to start here. We're just gonna light this candle to bring in some good energy. I'm just gonna light this incense because, it smells in here. We wanna bring in some new scents, some new vibes, and they've been open to that. The client that I mentioned, I don't wanna say her name, but one thing we did with her, she had lost her husband 6 months prior to me coming into her journey. And she was then on hospice and was given a 6-month sentence herself. She was really, really clung to his personal and physical belongings. Her house looked like he had just lived in there the night before, 6 months after his death. And we talked about the spiritual meaning of that. She was very Christian and she felt like getting rid of that stuff will be like her erasing him from her life. And I simply just, through conversation, through talking about the trauma she had an adverse relationship with her daughter. So we got to the bottom of that and why holding on to things was so significant to her. We actually realized she was holding on to relationships that were not serving her in all facets of her life. And once we were able to kind of abolish that mindset, she became comfortable with getting rid of his things and ushering in new energy and cleansing her space of that, which for me is very spiritual. She might have not seen it that way, but for me, that was ritualistic. She actually has withstood far beyond her 6-month lifespan or life sentence they gave her. She is still here today. She's still very active, still very awake. And I believe a lot of that had to do with her releasing that emotional baggage and then that physical baggage that came. So it's really just coming in with a gentle heart, being very, very over explanatory if needed, making sure that my client is comfortable. I haven't had any clients yet where I could really get deep into ritual besides just candle lighting, incense, and praying. But I will lead prayer as well for my clients if that's something they want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
In the Afterwords guide, your focus really is on storytelling, you being a poet, you being a writer, and you being able to create a safe and sacred space for people to share legacy
Yeah.
and to share their story, which I think is beautiful. And so I would like for you to really talk about the birth of the Afterwards guide and what people can take away from that guide and how they may be able to implement that into their transition planning for themselves and or for a family member.
Yeah, I believe the act of writing is very spiritual. It's also a form of energy transmutation. I'm a scripter, so I almost don't believe something's going to happen till I get it on pen and paper. It's got to come from my hand. I can't just type it. So I believe there's a lot of power in actually writing down things that you want and things that you believe and feel. So I mentioned I started writing poetry when I was like 12. I've always been a writer myself, and I've noticed that one of my gifts is writing and speaking. And I don't usually have to think about things, they come to me very easily. Hence, like the prayer that I'll do for some people, I don't write these things down. It literally is a form of expression. So, in creating the afterwards, it came to me in meditation. I was like, oh my God, this is it. My father died in 2017. I didn't publish his book until last year, but it literally just came to me like, wow, we need to be able to write our stories. We need to be able to tell our stories. I'm sure, as you know, for years, our history has been passed down through oral tradition, which is great. It makes us very unique from other cultures. But how many translations of that thing can we believe are truly accurate when your grandma had one experience with that person, and then your auntie had a different, and then your mom had a totally different experience of this same person? How much better could it be if this person got to tell their story in their own words, like I wished for my father? So I know now there's a lot of power in having that agency. There's a lot of power in having the autonomy to say, when I die, this is what I want to happen. This is how I want y'all to feel. And this is what I expect to look like. This is what I expect to happen once I'm gone. It really shatters that glass ceiling that a lot of us try not to even reach because of fear. And it gives you a lot of power. I said before, you don't have that confusion or that doubt of like, well, I don't want to talk about my death because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think I'm even have enough money for my family. Instead of keeping these things bottled in, once you can see it on paper, you start to think of a lot of other things too. The more you learn, I don't know how many times my death plan has changed. Like I started wanting maybe to be cremated, but the more I learned about different death practices, the more I confronted it for myself, the more I realized like, hey, I think I kind of want a little party. I want y'all to do this. I want y'all to do that. It starts to evolve because you're no longer avoiding it. And that's what the afterwards is all about. It's all about confronting that fear, confronting your life, and taking ownership of your story, no matter what point in your journey you're at. It's never too early or too late. It is okay to write down who you are and express who you are so that the people who come after you know how you interpreted your own life.
Yeah, I think that's so. I love storytelling
Yeah,
because you can set the tone. It's your
exactly.
story in your own words. And I think that is a beautiful way to leave something behind about who you were and actually someone be able to read what was actually in your head for
Exactly.
sure. So, what does the process look like when someone reaches out to you for you to tell their story? And I feel like it's so creative.
Yeah, first visit yourafterwords.com. I have a consultation form where you can actually outline all of those things you just mentioned. Do you want to tell your story in a video form? Would you like it in print, in an actual memoir, or in an interview like how you and I are doing now, where I'm just asking you questions and you get to explain who you are and what it is that you do. So from there, there's a series of consultations just to make sure that we're both the right fit for one another, which would consist of video calls. Sometimes it might be me actually coming in person to meet with that person so they can get the vibe from me, I can get the vibe from them, and I can also determine, can I tell this story with honor and integrity, and can I do this person justice? So it starts with just visiting the website, filling out the consultation. I would also say meditating and praying on it, envisioning how it is that you want your story to be told, and then coming with an idea. And from there, we move. I have a background in journalism and production. So I feel like I'm pretty savvy in a lot of different mediums. We can get your story out however you want. I've done videos for funerals where we do these really unique like QR codes and everyone scans a QR code and has this video for life. Of course, I've done obituary storytelling where people actually wanted to write their own eulogy and tell that in their own way. I've written poems for people from the family where everyone's told me like a bit in a piece about this person. Well, she liked to cook this. She used to do that. And then I've been able to put it in a poem that they can then memorialize in the obituary program. So there's so many mediums. I try not to shut out any way of doing it. And I really try to listen to what it is the person wants, get a vibe for what their personality is. If they seem like they'd be good on camera, let's do that. Or if they seem a little bit more reserved, we might just have a series of interviews where I write down things for you and then I give you a final product. I haven't had anyone yet say, "Hey, I don't like this, let's redo it." So I think it's working so far. But if that ever was to happen, I would have no problem redoing obviously something that needed to be done. One thing I will say that is tricky about it is if someone's at the end of life, for me, there's a sense of urgency to make sure it's accurate and it's detailed because you never know. We're on a ticking time bomb at that point. But just making sure that I do them as much justice as possible and share that story with the exact people that they wanted to be shared with. I've had people who want to memorialize their life and don't even want to show it to their family. They don't wanna show it to anyone. They wanna keep it in a lockbox for I don't know what, that's not my business, but I respect their wishes, you know? So it can be a long process. I typically tell people to give it 3 to 6 months. Mhm.
I think that's so dope.
Thank you.
And it is so therapeutic. It doesn't have to be so gloomy and
Mhm.
humdrum and, so heavy.
Right.
There's so much creativity and love and passion that you can put in telling your story and
Mhm.
having it be so memorable and no one's guessing because
Right.
you told your story on your terms. So what is on the horizon? What's next?
I know it's a blessing to be, like, booked and busy, right? So I try to remember that. Things are taking off. A lot of people are starting to have these conversations and understanding the work that I do, and I'm putting myself out there too. So I've got a lot of things on the horizon. I try not to go crazy with it because, like, it feels like I gotta be 10 places at once, but it's an exciting feeling. I'm just glad that people are starting to see it, kinda like what you said. I also wanna emphasize that the work that I'm doing is starting to expand more than just death. I'm really advocating for people to understand that death comes in so many forms, and you can tell your story of grief at any point in your life. So I'm doing a lot of consultation right now with business owners who have recently experienced death, but they're starting to realize, like, the death of my grandfather made me realize I don't wanna do the work that I've been doing the last 30 years. Like, now I wanna
Mhm.
change my whole life. Death does that to you. Death of anything. It could be death of a business, relocating to a different state, physically losing something. it manifests in so many different forms. And when we can address death in multiple ways, it becomes way easier to address it when it comes to actually losing a life. So for me, you can expect a lot of conference presentations this year. I am a doctoral researcher, so I will be publishing that research next year as long as I can keep all the strands of hair on my head in this process.
Yes.
And I just plan to do a lot more advocacy around these topics and on a national, local, and state level. I do work in government, so there are some policies that I'm really advocating for my people, and I hope to get more recognition around that and more opportunities like this to just speak, to be real, and to let people know what I do. And hopefully there'll be like 1,000 more me's in 10 years, people doing this work. Like that's the goal.
Yay! I'm going to make sure that all of your contact information is in the description below so people can reach out to you. I am such a fan of making sure that we support those in our community, loving on you, supporting, rooting for you, and of course,
Thank you.
just working with you so that you can continue to grow and expand and to put your work out there to help us heal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, there's always one question that I love to ask everyone before that we close out. And that question is, with all of your lived experience, everything that you've been through, everything that you've seen, what would you tell little Amiyah?
I'm already choked up. God, I would tell her to keep going, to do the thing, and to not care what anybody thinks. I mentioned I had a past in journalism, and I kinda got off of that because of society. So I would tell little Amaya to keep going after her dreams. Don't care about the judgments. It's okay to be a little weird. It's okay to be a little woo-woo. People might not understand it now, but it will make sense later, and they're gonna come to you and want that woo-ness. They want that whimsy. So just keep going with it, and don't let other people's opinions beat the path for you at all. Beat the drum to your own pace and keep doing your own thing, because that's the only way you're gonna succeed.
I love it.
Thank you
I
so much.
love it. I want to say thank you so much for your time, your energy, and allowing us to get into your head today.
Of course.
You are doing absolutely amazing work. And I hope that people walk away with a different view of death. Not that it's something to be feared, but something to be embraced and embodied.
Mhm.
And you can make it fun to leave your story for those that are left behind. And so for
Ashe.
that, I am so grateful and I honor you and the work that you continue to do in the community. I'm so glad
Thank
you're my
you.
sister friend
I
girl.
know. I'm so grateful for you creating such a safe container for us to come and do this and talk about what we do and be supported by other women. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying this, but I'm sure you know the weight of what you carry and you carry it every day from what I've seen so gracefully. I know, a little bit about your life outside of this and the fact that like we planned this months ago and it's still happening today. This is also a space of accountability. You're holding us to it. You're holding yourself to it. And I'm just so grateful for you. I'm getting chills all over.
Girl, me too. I'm about to cry. Girl, come on. Listen, I got to be a gangster,
I
okay?
know. It's okay to cry after we get off the camera.
Yes. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please, please, please support Amiyah in her work. I will make sure that all of her information is in the description below so you can check her out. She is doing amazing things, and we're going to continue to love on her, support her, push her, hold her accountable, wait for all her new publications to come out, and bring her back so she can let us know what new stuff she got popping coming up in
Yes.
2027. So thank you everyone for joining today, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Thank you.